A very different scene here today compared to the carnage of last night. You can see the fire engines there behind me. Not just here though, but all across America, the death of George Floyd has touched a very, very raw nerve. A moment perhaps for a president to call for calm and unity, you might think. But on Twitter today, Donald Trump is instead criticizing the Democratic mayor and governor here and calling for them, he says, to get tough and fight. He has also got the Pentagon reportedly on standby to send military police here this evening with just 4 hours' notice. And while, Matt, the president is right to say that there have been organised groups who are simply determined to cause destruction, you can certainly see that all around me with these burnt out buildings. I have to say, though, that the majority of people that we spoke to here last night said that they came in peace in the memory of George Floyd. And that they are here to rage against what they see as centuries of discrimination and mistreatment of black Americans at the hands of white police. And when you ask them what it will take for all this to stop, they simply say that they want justice. No justice, they say, no peace.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
For the fourth night in a row, an angry mob of protesters marched towards police, chanting the last words of George Floyd, the black man who died at the hands of white officers.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
They fired tear gas, but they marched on. And as the curfew time of 8 p.m. came and went, the National Guard abandoned their positions. But the protesters held theirs and pushed on.
From the area immediately. If you continue to obstruct, resist, you will be arrested.
So there were 4 cops present when George was murdered. One of them was finally arrested today after days of protest, but we're still waiting for the other 3. If you murder someone, or if you stand by as a police officer and let your co-worker murder someone, you need to be arrested because Black Lives Matter and you can't just kill people like that.
As night fell, the chants descended into chaos, arson and looting. These protesters using a crowbar to force open an ATM.
It's the 4th night of protests here. It began peacefully, but if anybody thought the arrest of a police officer for the murder of George Floyd would calm things down, take a look at this scene behind me.
A car repair yard was set on fire, the owner desperately trying to save vehicles, backing them out of the flames. As a furious mob demanded that they let it burn in the name of justice.
We're not asking for justice no more. We're demanding justice.
What do you want?
We want justice, not just now, but for when I have black and brown babies and when they have black and brown babies.
It's a little bit crazy because we're out here trying to show them that we're angry. I might not agree with the rioting and the looting, but I can say that people are showing their anger, they're frustrated. What's his name? George Floyd!
Yeah, justice. I mean, this is not just about George Floyd. It's about everything that's happened in our world. The government has failed us. The police has failed us. Corporations have failed us. It's time for them to hear us.
They made themselves heard in New York, a city still in lockdown. But what started out peacefully quickly became ugly as police suddenly turned on the crowd, beating demonstrators with batons and using pepper spray in response to water bottles being hurled by the crowd. Dozens were arrested. As they were in Atlanta, where crowds set fire to police cars and attacked the CNN building as the governor declared a state of emergency.
They just threw something on fire, Chris, a firecracker. Something's on fire!
In Detroit, police said shots were fired from a vehicle into a crowd of demonstrators, killing a 19-year-old man. And chaos even came to Donald Trump's front door. The White House was briefly placed in lockdown as the mob descended. One man even daring to climb a government building to spray his rage on the side of the wall. In all, 21 states witnessed violence, and beneath the fire and the fury, the same age-old message.
What's his name?
In Minneapolis, the epicenter of America's pain, the National Guard gradually returned to the streets as fire trucks attempted to douse the blaze. But there's no dousing the anger and hurt here.
I swear to God!
It's in the air and written on the walls. The last words of George Floyd for all to see.
Siobhan Kennedy reporting from Minneapolis. Well, joining me now from Washington is Tiffany Lofton, who's the director of the Youth College Division of the NAACP, America's Civil Rights Organization. Thanks for coming on the program, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me.
I can completely understand the rage of many, many millions of Americans at the killing of George Floyd, but the pictures that we saw in Siobhan's report of burning and looting, breaking open ATM machines and so on, that doesn't really help the cause, does it?
What we're looking at right now is a series of buildup of patterned events that have been taking place, most notably since 2014, when you all remember, of course, that the nation saw the same type of uprisings, the same type of rebellions after the murder of Michael Brown. And the demand for justice needs to be explained. And then that will give people the clarity as to why folks in this country that look like me are so emotionally tied to the conviction that Black lives do matter. It's not just the arrest that we are looking for police officers. It is the conviction and the accountability that we're looking for in this justice conversation.
In this case, there has been an arrest and the police officer has been charged with third-degree murder, which is a lot more than what happened to the man who killed Eric Garner, I think in 2014 in New York. So why do you think the reaction this time round has been that much stronger, that much more brazen than last time?
There's a few reasons for that. The first is we know that there are 4 officers in the video that we've seen who held down George Floyd, who murdered him, and the other 3 have not yet been arrested. It is the fastest, however, that we've ever seen a police chief not only fire the officers, but also make sure that one of them got arrested in the turnaround time that we've seen. That is not just the credit of a police chief because he's a Black man. It is the credit to the police chief of Minnesota because he also understands the relationship to community organizing. He has a relationship with the local and statewide NAACP there and President Leslie. And the relationship that existed before the death of George Floyd allows for him to make the smartest decisions to protect and support the community. Now we need the action that says we are going to have a fair jury, we're going to have a fair judicial process, and that those officers will get convicted.
But that credit has not been reflected in the fact that there have been riots and demonstrations in dozens of American cities. Why do you think it's so particularly strong this time?
I think it's particularly strong this time for 2 major reasons. One, again, we saw this in 2014, and no solutions or reforms on the national level have come to play. We have a commander-in-chief in office who has never tried to help calm down the racial violence in this country that we've experienced, but has clearly been agitating the violence that's been taking place. He did not come out and say anything about the murder of George Floyd until after folks started the rebellions and the uprisings in the streets. And so clearly the protest and folks staying out past curfew and the things that y'all are seeing on TV is getting not only the president's attention, but also international attention.
Right.
What we're seeing right now, the second thing is what we're seeing right now is folks really want not only the system change, the systematic change in this country, but we're dealing with COVID-19. I know that you all mentioned the number of deaths. We're over 100,000 deaths for COVID-19, but there's also 60 million people who have lost their jobs in the last 3 months. And so what you're looking at is not just a combination of police brutality, but the criminalization of Black people in America.
But there was no one rioting or demonstrating against the, one could argue, gross incompetence that led to all those people dying from the virus, or indeed the state of the economy.
That's actually not true. Just because you all don't see the buildings getting burned down or people out in the street protesting does not mean that that happens on a daily basis. For example, the NAACP, the Black Lives Matter organization. We also have the Movement for Black Lives organization. We have the Black Youth Project 100, and we have Dream Defenders founded after the murder of Trayvon Martin. Every single one of those organizations has been taken to the streets, organizing voters to register to vote, to fill out the census, and to participate in the electoral process.
I'll leave it there. Tiffany Lofton, thank you very much indeed.